This is a 50,000 mile M3 CSL, which is coming for us for our Underside Restoration service and subframe panel repair and reinforcement process. This is just documenting the start of the procedure when the vehicle comes in and the condition of it. The CSL is now fully stripped underneath, with the exhaust and heat shields and V-brace and under trays and axle, and fuel tank and prop shaft, brake lines, fuel lines, all removed. Side skirt's coming off next, and we're just starting the degrease process. And you can see all the dirt on the floor that accumulates over the years. Little bits of corrosion as well around the subframe mounts and where the fuel tanks rub on the front of the rear axle carrier panel. Nice and clean up where the tank and the prop shaft are, because they've got covers all over them, up into the wheel arches. So all this is going to be scrubbed and get back to factory sort of e-coat and sealer, and then we can see what we're dealing with, mark out the corrosion points that we need to attend to, also carry out the subframe repair and reinforcement process. So we've got some cracks occurring. Got a little semicircle crack around that left front mount there. This is the right front mount. We've definitely got a semicircle crack around that one, and a spot weld failure just onto the right, and a little crack coming out of there. There's an example of corrosion which we need to attend to, get rid of all of this. And this is the right rear subframe mount, lots more corrosion. At the moment no cracks, but we'll see more once we degrease. And then left rear, which has got the common crack on the fold there. A little bit of spot weld movement by the looks of things, and a bit of corrosion which again needs attending to. A little bit of a sealer split here on the side lip, so we definitely know the floor has moved or is moving. So that's the reinforcement work that will be happening. And then obviously we've got all the scrubbing and cleaning. In this section here, that is classified as dirty, but this is all the wax that gets covered over the brake pipes and fuel lines at the factory, and then the wax just collects the dirt over all the years it's on the road. Got a reminder there, we've got a carbon airbox because it's a CSL, so we can't move the gearbox cross member down too much without taking the box off itself, because we don't want any damage on that. Then moving on to the front, still need to fit the steering rack out. Got it stripped down at the front, wheel arch liners out. So we can start assessing for corrosion. And we're taking front subframe cross member off, so we'll be going up into the engine bay area and the lower chassis legs as well. The CSL is fully degreased and all the debris and road dirt and oil greases have been taken off, all by hand. And we're back to the factory sort of finish, which is the E-coat and then the seam sealer and then like the overspray where the car paint goes into the wheel arches. So now we can see all the corrosion marks on the left rear subframe and the common crack. A few spot welds movement. Spot weld failed up there. And a seam, rust seam there. Some of the studs and the grommets have a little bit of corrosion. That's the right rear subframe mount, quite corroded. A lot of corrosion underneath the paint now. You can see it sparkling where it's bubbling underneath E-coat. Spring perch is corroded. Quite bad corrosion there on the battery box. That bracket's for 330s and other E46 models, non-M3s, so we'll take that off. A little bit of corrosion on the brake brackets and the fuel tank brackets. Front right subframe mount. Left front, one of our Redish Motorsport V2 reinforcement plates there. So all this corrosion is going to be taken off and got back to bare metal. Then we can treat the bare metal in a multi-stage procedure. Trailing arm pockets, V-brace contacts, fuel tank straps. That was quite a bad fuel tank strap. And quite bad in that trailing arm pocket as well. 50,000 miles this CSL. And then we've got silly little things, but all this needs to be attended to so that it doesn't grow. We've got corrosion just trying to come out of that lip there and on these seams. And the same with down the chassis legs. It's only very small, but we have to do something with it before we paint. We need to treat this and got rid of this. A little bit of surface corrosion on the central chassis legs and inside the ends of the legs, on the drains for the seal, and where the clipping points in on the chassis legs, that will get taken out. You see this corrosion colour coming from there. Front of the seal area where the near where the jacking point is, where the wheel arch liners are hiding that normally. Front control arm mounts and into the front arch. We see we've got turret corrosion up on the top. It's all just surface corrosion. Just documenting what we've got before we start. We're well into the corrosion protection system now on this CSL, and we'll do it in multi-layer stages because there's so many pieces on most BMWs that are corroded. Mark pointed out in the earlier pictures, even just the small amounts in seams here, it's impossible to get all this back to bare metal in one go and coat it with the metal prep and then the 2 layers of rust preventative paint. Impossible to do that all in one go. It spans over several days because there are so many points on most vehicles that need attending to. And if you did do it over several days and left some of the bare metal at the start of the process, when you went back to it, you'd find that it was hazed over with corrosion just in the atmosphere. Just the moisture in the atmosphere would make it corrode, so we do it in stages. So some of this has already been treated with the marine, the marine clean happens first to get the dirt off, and then some of it, the hazy sort of etched looking areas like here, that's had the treatment. Once we got back to bare metal, that bare metal has now been treated with the Por 15 metal prep, it's called, or prep and ready, as people used to know, and that gets washed off, and then it's basically an etch. It neutralizes corrosion found, and then also etches the floor, the bare metal, to then allow the Por 15 rust preventative paint to stick to, and that gets washed off with a damp warm sponge, and then air dried with compressed air, and then also hot air dryer to make sure that we've got all moisture out of any seams or under any other panels or laps. So then once that panel's etched like that, then we do our rust preventative paint. And if you've ever worked with the Por 15 rust preventative paint, you'll know it's a brush on item that self-levels. It doesn't like seams or edges, so it has to have 2 coats, and it dries extremely flat and smooth and very resilient to abrasion or stone chips or moisture or anything like that. It's probably the best stuff we've come across. So it looks very patchy now, but this is in progress. So that's the first stage we did about a day or so ago. I think at this stage we're probably about 18 hours in, we worked out, to do this properly. This is sort of restoration status, so this sort of thing doesn't get rushed or just glossed over. You know, the wire wheeling process, when we take seam sealer off and find corrosion and make sure we've got as much out of the metal grain as possible, that takes hours in itself, well over a day's worth of work all on its own. We still have to do the repair and reinforcement process with the cracks on the rear axle carrier panel, which is next. Just show you an example of here how much of the corrosion we've managed to get out. And this metal, as you can see, it's looking a bit of a funny colour. That's the etching process of the Por 15 metal prep, as it's called. And we've done the extra items that we do on most vehicles now. This one still has more work to go. As you see us do, we've got corrosion in there. When you see black pits only, we're okay, it's neutralised, but when there's still an iron colour coming through, we know there's still corrosion in the grain of the metal, so we need to go over that one again. So we take a battery, this is the battery tray. All E46s have the same battery tray floor panel, and therefore there's several brackets on here. There's one big long bracket, which is where you see there's no sealer on here now, which corrodes terribly, and you can't get behind it. The corrosion is sit in there. You can clear the tops, but you can never clear all the corrosion from behind it. So we take it off. We belt sand it, a mixture of belt sanding and drilling through the spot welds to remove that bracket, because the only reason it's on there, same with 2 other brackets up here, one there and connected there, and another bracket over here and here. The only reason they're on there is because of non-M3 models, so like 316 to 330s, their carbon canister for the fuel expansion neutralizing parts sits up there, whereas on an M3 it sits here, on a non-M3 it sits here. And it's useless. It's no point being on a car whatsoever. It's just a corrosion trap, and we see battery trays that have corroded out, so we take those brackets off and make sure that corrosion does not set in those points. We've got quite a lot of the corrosion tackled now and treated with the metal prep and the Por 15 rust preventative paint. Still a few sections to do, and now we're just, especially around the rear subframe mount points, which we're just repairing and reinforcing now. We've repaired the left front, the hairline semicircle crack that was around the mounting point. Same with the right front, as well as drilling out a couple of spot welds that were poor and replacing them with a plug weld method. Nothing at fault on the right rear mount, and on the left rear we had the common hairline crack, which was stop drilled and pulse welded over. And then just to show the failure of 2 spot welds in the side left lip. We've got one that's clearly broken there, and we've got another one which has started to break. It's got a ring all the way around it and separated but not corroded hugely compared to that one up there. So we will belt sand through those, replace them with a MIG weld technique, and then what we've been doing for years, one of the first I think repairs to do these, is we MIG weld those two panels together, so that keeps the rear axle carrier panel in good contact with the wheel arch panel here. And then once the MIG welds here are gently flattened down and checked one final time, then we can then start the reinforcement plate work. So after cleaning the welds down, there was a couple of imperfections which we weren't happy with, circled in blue. So in that occasion we drill those out with a spot weld drill bit, replace them with a plug weld there on the left, and then there's one that was filed down just now to produce a flat metal finish. And then rechecked and repaired, and then we're quite happy. Those mounts have been repaired to a high standard with no gaps or holes. Now we're happy we've repaired the cracks and broken spot welds on the rear axle carrier panel around the subframe mount points. We've cleaned the sealer and the E-coat off of the panel, so it's back to bare metal, where we're going to be welding the reinforcement plate, and an excessive amount around the area so that we don't get any burning of any E-coat or sealer, which leads to moisture problems. So that's just been cleaned back to bare metal. And now we'll use a compressed air line to blow all the dust and any loose seam sealer off of the panel, and then we'll also go over it every one, with a clean microfiber to make sure that we take any small particles off, because next we're going to be doing a weld through primer spray, and that effectively is the only sort of seal which is going to have on the bare metal behind the plate, so we don't want to leave any grit or corrosion or any sealer or anything in the way. And on these sort of mounts where they especially get quite heavily corroded and pitted, especially under the bottom, we've had a POR 15 metal prep solution on there, which is what goes on before the rust preventative paint, and that neutralizes corrosion, tries to draw out of the grain of the metal, especially in heavy pitted areas, and also etches the floor. That's the back side of our reinforcement plates, with the all-important weld-through primer on there, so that there's no bare metal hidden behind the plates once they're welded. And that's the same on the chassis of the vehicle. The weld-through primer applied just oversizing the size of the reinforcement plates which we're about to weld on, so there's no bare metal behind the plates, and there's no chance of corrosion corroding the plate or the chassis. It's all fully protected as best as possible. There's our V2 reinforcement plates lined up, and we've got the weld-through primer overlapping the plates around, so we know there won't be any bare metal behind the plates. We've got it on the back of the plate and also on the chassis itself, and then that can simply be cleaned off after the welding process has happened. That's the right front. Right rear is not on there yet, and then the left rear sits up like that, and there's the perfect hole lineup. So once we've welded our Redish Motorsport V2 reinforcement plates on, we've got an example here of the 4 stages of the secondary sort of repair which we do, which we think is fairly unique to us. We've been doing it for a few years, and we think others are missing a trick here, because carrying out the crack repair and using reinforcement plates is basically repairing the outside panel, but we want to make some additional connection to the internal threaded piece which is sat in there. So we specifically researched, by cutting one apart, the exact locations where plug welds would be beneficial to connect the reinforcement plate, the external skin of the rear axle carrier panel and the internal threaded mount all together in a 3-layer plug weld connection. So that's here. So this plate is showing that once we've done our weld to actually attach the plate to the chassis, and in these areas these other holes are for aiding the installation and curving of the plate to follow the contour of the floor. The bottom two are actually left so that the outer panel can be drilled out. So they're centre punched, waiting to be drilled. Then moving on to the right front, these three, two are in contact, one is purposely gapped. Those have now been drilled out using an 8mm drill bit, so that we can actually contact the internal cavity of the threaded receiver. Then moving on to the right rear, these two have been welded, plug welded, so we've got a 3-layer multi-connection there. And then the rear ones also have a slot designed to be able to carry out the same procedure but on a vertical plane. And then eventually, once they've been flushed back and cleaned, then you can get them like that. So a fairly neat install. Hopefully OEM looking, most people would tend to agree, especially once we've got our multi-layer corrosion protection and sprayable seam sealer on to blend into the BMW factory textures. These are the powder coated items we'll be using on the CSL Underside Restoration. 63 items in total in OEM colours. So we've got satin black and titanium silver, and they've had a matte lacquer as well. So they've got extra protection and durability, but also keep the OEM sort of finishes, which are sort of satin matte based. So we've got everything from the front end on the left of this picture all the way through to the rear items, roughly laid out like it would be on the vehicle. And I will be putting new bushes, ball joints, wheel bearings, and every single fixing we can get from BMW into the assembly process shortly. Quick walk around of the powder coated items. Titanium silver for the sort of cast aluminium effect look on all the original aluminium components, and then a satin black for the original black items. And we used rail colour charts to match these, so it's the closest you've got to the bare aluminium. Obviously bare aluminium from the factory isn't painted, so it's just a natural sort of metal colour. These are the closest we could find. And then they've got a matte lacquer on them as well for extra protection. And then when it comes to things like the springs, we're going to do the green sort of paint brush strokes down them, which is the factory CSL colour on some of these items to identify them, and try and replicate original stickers for front shock absorbers and other items where original stickers would have had to be taken off or have just deteriorated over the years. The corrosion protection work is finally finished on the CSL. We're up to about probably 45 hours we estimate we've put into this chassis now in the pursuit to hunt and find and remove all traces of corrosion, even under the seam sealer that haven't shown any signs, but we've located problems that have been hidden and rectified them by taking it back to bare metal using the Pore 15 metal prep solution, and then the Pore 15 rust preventative paint, which is what this black items are here. So you're looking up at the rear axle carrier panel. where the reinforcement plates are, and then into the wheel arch areas. Found areas of corrosion up on the rear arch wing areas on both sides. Removed a redundant battery box bracket for 330 models. Spring perch areas, then moving into the fuel tank areas. So seams and lap joints that have been suffering from corrosion, and even made up some special tools to support the engine, support the chassis, so we can take the jacking blocks out, because we had corrosion around the jacking block and the V-brace bolt, which meant originally we couldn't get to it. So we've made these tools up so we can get access to these jacking blocks on both sides. And then down through the tunnel wasn't too bad. We've got the common areas around the chassis legs, and anywhere where a panel ends seems to be a bit of a weak spot. We took the gearbox out to allow more access for the transmission tunnel, because we found areas of concern up in the tunnel. And then we took the drastic action of removing the engine. So it's now turned into the biggest and deepest underside restoration we've ever done. So the engine out allows us to get to the chassis legs, which were corroding around the roll bar mounts, especially this side because the air conditioning compressor was in the way. We've been able to make a much better job of this with the engine out. And then with the engine out we can also mask up areas from inside the engine bay that we'd normally struggle to get to in our masking process, so that before we start our paint stage, that no overspray ends up going into the engine bay or onto any other panels. We need to do some brake pipe work as well still. So that's what it looks like with the engine out. And next we're up to the stage of the masking next, before the paint. The CSL is nearing ready for paint now. As you know, the engine came out a while back. And we just spent the day masking, just so we got the tops of the sides of the chassis legs ready for a little bit of colour there. And then this is just the first mask, just from the underside areas upwards, and then shortly we'll put a genuine BMW body shop cover over the entire car and then mask that to this brown tape. We've got all inside the arches blocked off. Any little area where we know paint can get is covered. That's the genuine BMW car covers they use at the body shop and sometimes in the workshop. So that's on top of everything, and then masked up to where we did the under mask, we'll call it, earlier on. One final check over and then that's ready for paint. Now that the car is totally masked and checked over, all like in the previous videos, and all holes and grommet areas that we know would leak overspray have been contained and plugged at the front end of the car, and the rear end we know we're happy with. So we've got our workshop cover there, which stops the any spray or seam sealer going into the cabin, and we're fully checked out. We're just trying some different primers there. There's a white one there, So we're now ready to start the seam sealer process, the sprayable textured seam sealer, just to blend in on the areas where we've removed seam sealer for our various corrosion protection works over this time that the vehicle's been with us. And remember, we've had these brackets off to clean the corrosion behind on the floor and on the inside of these brackets, and they've been put back on. So now we can start the sprayable seam sealer process. This is in the front left of the wheel arch of the CSL. You can see where we've done the 415 work on the corroded areas, well, once after taking the corrosion away and treating those. And we're now just going through the process of masking all these up, all these little holes where we know that their paint spray could go through, up into the turret there, before we do our paint spray. So this is the final video of the CSL before paint. So it's just had this sprayable seam sealer, which is this textured finish here. That's looking at the left rear plate, and we've tried to replicate the factory lines where the factory robots do the spray and seam sealer. That's just going across the top left to join up with the textured top side. These front sections don't have any. Now it's trying to revisit the join. That's a factory one up there, sort of going in a sprayed arc. And then we've got replacing seam sealer on areas that we had to remove for our corrosion work. That's turning around to the right rear plate. These are our reinforcement plates. Then we go over to the battery tray area where we remove this redundant bracket which the non-Ms have. So all the way along there, which is a big collection point of rust, and up there we've blended some new seam sealer into those edges. And then on the areas we've removed around mounting studs. This is our factory, our workshop cover, so we can get paint over it and not worry about getting it inside the vehicle. And we've got sealer over the various join lines, trying to replicate where they had it from factory before we removed it. And then going out into the wheel arch area on that side lip that we've stitch welded. Doing some colour testing up there. And moving over to the jacking points and sealing these lips where we had on this folded line here where we had corrosion. And this is nice. I think that's my favourite sort of line there, where it's folded those, sealed over those, the line. You can still see the edge of the metal, but we've got a nice sealer bead over it all. Heading off into the jacking point area, and then moving down the centre of the car. That's on the central chassis leg on the right hand side, covering over joints that we'd removed previously. And then going over to the passenger side, these are the central floors. A little bit around the very edge of the end of the chassis leg. Took a lot of time just delicately putting this on, applying it in a textured sprayable finish, and even on the outputs in the seal for the water to escape from, just to try and make it look as textured like this, like that's the factory texture, and again there, and we've tried to match that so that once it's painted, you may well see it, but it's going to be as neat as possible in those. So it's mainly at the rear. We've got all this seam sealer, which isn't heavy. We haven't gone everywhere with it. We've done it in delicate areas. To be fair, the BMW stuff can be quite messy, can be quite thick. There was an amazing messy bit up here at the front. This is in the transmission tunnel now, and that's a factory, possibly human, but done at the factory. Look how flexible and large that is. Obviously paint going on that is going to flex off if that moves, because it's just too flexible, but some of the BMW stuff's messy and some of it's really nice sort of robot installation. So we've got a mixture of that and ready for the paint next. just partway through the process, done the colour now. That's flashed off, so we're going to do the satin lacquer clear coat next, and that's the final coat. There you go, that's one of the rear reinforcement plates. That light in that angle gives you an idea of the satin finish. We've done the E-coat replication paint through the engine bay and underneath the car now, the satin finish, so we're just going to do the sapphire black and try and replicate what the robots did when they sprayed the chassis on the production line, and just dust it over the tops of the chassis legs. And we've taken pictures of what it looks like before, so we're going to do our best to replicate that, and that's what we're doing next. The sapphire black base coat's applied to the engine bay now, so just as it would land, trying to replicate the factory finish where they don't get much on the underside sections because it's all sprayed from above by the robots, and then it's gently blended, and whatever is the high point picks it up. And the same with the left chassis leg, matte finish, no gloss on there, and blends off into the tunnel at the back of the chassis legs. That's the left front arch with the base colour on, the factory E-coat replication and a satin lacquer. Now we're going to replicate the factory robot sapphire black overspray and then satin lacquer to seal it in. So we're on the rear left arch now, just doing the OEM dusting of sapphire black. That's the factory colour, the E-coat that we've tried to replicate, and that's what it looks like. It's like an olivey green colour. That's it as it's gone on. And if I take you over to the other side, which is had the dusting of sapphire black, to try and replicate what the robot would be spraying on the side of the car, then that's what we've come up with. So we're quite pleased with it. Looks fairly factory, just typical sort of dustings from our pictures of when we started the process of where the factory overspray goes when there's painting the rear panel and painting all this battery box area. There's a larger section of overspray here because they paint all of this black, and then there's some up on the brackets up here, and then a general sort of dusting which picks out all the highlights and curves of the stamped panels. And then there's also a little bit more around in this side where the robot would turn to paint the folded arch section all the way up here. So we can just satin lacquer that in now, clear coat over the top, and then we'll be completing the spray section. So just a quick reminder of what it looks like, the olive green. And there it is with the sapphire black dust coat. So the rebuild process on the CSL has commenced. We've got the fuel lines on, the stainless steel BMW fuel lines that have been cleaned, along with the fuel filter and brackets and everything. Obviously it's pretty obvious, but every single fixing that we can possibly order from BMW is going to be replaced during this process. So whether it be a simple speed clip or a self-tapping screw, or an axle bolt, a nut, a bracket, a chassis clip, or anything, plastic nut, the lot. It just gets ordered, fitted, no expense spared. This is the ultimate, to date, the ultimate underside restoration that we have carried out, and probably will carry out, to be honest. Then we've got the brake lines, the new BMW black brake lines, which we've ordered. They come in straight sections, so if you've ever ordered BMW brake lines, you'll know how strong these are. These are steel and they're powder coated. They're probably the best option. A lot of people like the copper, but obviously this is the OEM original route. These are really durable and they come in straight lines, so really hard to bend. So we've replicated the factory routes and put all the new fixing clips in, so they go up behind the fuel tank there, over on the left rear part of the axle. One loops up to the left rear supply bracket, and then one goes over the axle, follows that blue vent pipe, and then over to the right rear. So that blue vent pipe is the fuel vapor pipe, which is going all the way up to the engine bay. So the rear end of the car is mainly to be started over the next day or so. You might be able to see the dustings of black, which you saw in the previous videos, which just give that the factory sort of finish that we're after. And then the fuel lines join up to the factory locations just up here in the engine bay. I forgot to bring a torch with me for this part of the video, so it's a little bit dark, but nice new BMW wheel arch liners. So if we stand back a little bit, I'll make a better video tomorrow, that just gives you a good idea of the fact that we've started the rebuild. So this gives you a nice example of the sprayable seam sealer that we've applied and spent a decent amount of time masking and soft edging, so that rather than just spraying on and landing anywhere, we're trying to replicate the factory finishes. We obviously go on about that quite a lot, but that's the point of this whole build. It's a replica of what it came like from the factory. So this is some of our sprayable seam sealer across the top of our reinforcement plates there, to join up with this front edge where they sealed it from the spot welding marks up at the top. And we've got sprayable seam sealer on these joins here, where the rear axle carrier panel joins the seat panel. And this is our sprayable seam sealer as well, where the rear seat panel has a reinforcement. So we've shaped all the BMW metal brake pipes. They come in straight lengths, and we opt for those rather than the copper ones because they look original and they're very hard wearing, powder coated, and then we can wax them if necessary before the car goes. And there's the blue fuel vent pipe and the black one going all the way to the front, along with the stainless steel BMW fuel pipes there, and the new fixing clips and the fuel filter assembly. And you can just see the edge of the front wheel arch liners, the new ones that we've got in there. And there's some more of the fuel filler system, and the carbon expansion tank is now in place with all clean pipes, powder coated brackets, and then you can just see the expansion box up in the wheel arch there. And we're just getting ready for the fuel tank to be installed next. Here's the fuel expansion box and the filler pipe neck and a new supply rubber going over to the tank, all installed, along with new BMW correct crimp clips. And the fuel tank's in now with the straps, powder coated straps, and then new washers, new rubbers and new bolts. And these are those rusty bits, those are our stoppers that we'll take off before we put the new lines on, brake lines. And we've also put the new bulkhead sound deadening pad on there, because the old one was a little bit scagged and also quite soft, probably from the heat. We've cleaned these heat shields up, so they're looking nice and fresh. And now we're just at the stage of engine installation. Just taking it off the mounting cradle. We've got the new powder coated subframe there and engine mounts and nuts and fixings. And Darren's here just preparing the gearbox, taking it off of the stand so we can get that back into the CSL. Engine's halfway through installation, coming up from underneath. WP Pro carbon ceramic rear brake kit, 6-piston calipers for the CSL Restoration. Finishing a really nice orange colour on the calipers, and these fantastic carbon ceramic rear brakes with the custom E46 sensor hats. And these are some of the genuine BMW clutch, flywheel, transmission side of part things. Genuine rear main crankshaft oil seal, clutch release bearing there, and the fork, because the old one's got a worn section to it. Flywheel dowel, clutch ball pin and spring clip, clutch bolts, flywheel bolts, guide sleeve for the front of the transmission, which the release bearing slides on, and also the 4 bolts there to hold it in. Another order of BMW Parts and Fixing. So we've got the bulkhead heat insulation. It comes with a set of 3 before the engine and gearbox go back in. Various fuel crimp connections. Rather than using Jubilees, we're using the genuine BMW crimped ones. Presto cages for self-tapping screws, air conditioning hoses, air conditioning O-rings, sorry, fuel filler neck and the associated clips, which actually are Jubilees, and then various axle bolts, so the front, rear subframe, front studs and nuts, the rear bolts, the diff bolts for the front and back, and the push rod bolts, backing plate bolts, diff washers, then fuel tank strap rubbers, and the metal sleeves, and then the bolts. Another delivery of genuine bits for the CSL, trailing arm pieces and handbrake and camber bolts. And I just thought I'd add to the end of this video a nice new shiny rear silencer heat shield which turned up today. Here's another order of genuine BMW bits for the CSL rebuild, shock absorber related at the moment. So rear shock absorbers, front shocker piston covers, and there should be 2 rear ones. We're waiting for 1 more to be delivered. Rear dampers or bump stops that go over the pistons, and in front pinch bolts for the strut, rear top mount base plates, rear genuine top mounts, some front top mount nuts for in the engine bay, some general rear axle fixing bolts, and another one of these rear shocker bottom bolts. We're waiting for another one of those. So that sorts the shock absorber parts out for the CSL. Another order of BMW parts for the CSL rebuild. Another handbrake cable that we were waiting for. Lots of various fixings, the top hat fixings there and the heat shield fixings, the other rear shock absorber bolt, and ABS and brake pad wiring clips there, steering shaft joint, front anti-roll bar rubber mounts and front anti-roll bar drop links, and the nuts, various self-tapping screws for underneath the car and the speed clips that go with them. And in power steering items we've got the bottle cap O-ring and both the banjo bolts. I think one of them's got a check fold in it, yeah, that one there. Steering rack bolts and nuts, and sealing rings, one of the shock absorber front top mount support rings that was bent, or we found bent, some other various bolts, and gearbox compression springs or I-vent springs, and then power steering hose clips, and the rivets for the front jacking fixture on the front under tray, few more bolts for I think that's for the front ABS sensors, and then rear brake flexi hose retaining clips. Some more new under trays for the CSL restoration. I think we are going for attempting to do every single plastic on the car underneath. So we've got the main front engine under tray there. That's a metal panel which is one of the fuel filter covers. That's another fuel filter, the plastic, which goes over the metal. And then we've got the 2 front bumper or front lower wheel arch liner extensions which go onto the front bumper. And the central heat shield's arrived from Germany now. That's the one that covers the prop shaft and allows the exhaust heat to stay underneath the car. So no corrosion on this piece, obviously, because it's brand new. They normally corrode around the fixing holes at the front, the rear, and also these bits up here. That should make a good contrast against the exhaust. This is pretty much a complete exhaust fitting kit, all ordered individually for the CSL restoration rebuild. Put everything out there, rubber mounts, nuts, bolts, sealing rings, pretty much everything that's on the car. There are a couple of incorrect items, but for the purpose of the picture and the video, I've still laid them out. So there's 2 of these gaskets normally. We've ordered 2 and only 1 have arrived, so there should be normally 2 in this picture. And these bolts here, these are meant to be the downpipe Torx bolts, the M10s, and they've sent some wrongly picked items from the warehouse, it looks like, because we've got some M12 sort of rear axle bolts by the look of it. So they'd normally be a black hex Torx bolt, so just showing you what they would be and keeping them on the video for that. And interestingly, I've laid out some prices, because a lot of people always ask what sort of price these repairs or restoration processes are, and they totally are individually priced. We have to see the cars first, and but it's just a small example of one of the small orders for all the exhaust fittings, and I thought I'd lay them out. So we've got the rear 3 exhaust rubbers for the rear silencer, 9842, and the 6 bolts that hold them up, 511. Downpipe Torx nuts, ignore the picture but the price is still correct, they'd be £30.62, and the 4 copper nuts that hold them on would be £16.99. These are all retail prices from BMW, including the VAT. And then we've got the centre exhaust rubber mounts, which are £39.41, and the 4 bolts that hold them in, which are £3.31. A pair of centre cat to centre section gaskets would be £24.60. These are the downpipe metal gaskets, the compressed metal gaskets, £20.40. And then the 2 sealing rings for the rear silencer to the centre section joint. Solid one's £8.75 and the compressed metal one £8.65. And then the 1 flange there that has to be put onto the new BMW exhausts, the slip flange one, £11.15. The 8 bolts that go in to hold the centre section metal supports, £6.34. And then these are the 3 nuts and bolts that go through the 3 rear rubber mounts, £2.74 for the bolts, £1.04 for the 3 nuts. Then the centre section join is held together, the cats and the centre section. 6 of the bolts, £4.25, and 6 of the copper nuts are £13.82. Anything copper nut is very expensive from BMW. And then you've got the final lot, which is the rear silencer clamps, the joins. These go through those clamps there. So the big copper nuts, square nuts, £14.02, and the bolts £8.69. So quite a pricey lot of parts there. That's obviously just one small order in this restoration process, and that lot of exhaust fixings there is £318.67. And we've also got some gearbox mounts, rubber mounts for the back of the gearbox cross member, the 4 bolts that go into the chassis, 2 top nuts with the washers, and then the bottom nuts and bottom washers. These are the front reinforcement under tray bolts, the ones with the curved round washers, and these are the bolts for the V-brace, 3 for the V-brace and 4 for each of the front control arm, rear bush brackets. Lots of people get these mixed up because they're the same bolt size and pitch and length, but they've got slightly different heads and washers, so it's nice to get them correct, and that's what we're going to do on this CSL rebuild. Here's our other exhaust gasket from the centre section. It was missing on the other order, and those are the M10 Torx bolts for the downpipe exhaust joint. So that completes the exhaust fixing set, and we can go on and get that installed now. We're also going for new steering tie rods on the CSL rebuild. So there's one pictured there, and the other one's coming into stock tomorrow. More parts for the CSL restoration, and we've upped the game on this one, going for genuine BMW front wishbones, genuine BMW front wheel bearing hubs. We've got steering tie rods, one's here, one's still on its way to us. We've got new hub nuts there, some lock nuts for some of the front suspension arms, and then the rear dust covers, and then the front caps as well. And also BMW genuine steering rack gaiter repair kit, so you get the boots and the clips and the little rubber washers there. These are the items for the brake caliper systems on the M3 CSL. So we've got rear BMW rubber flexible hoses, the rear CSL caliper piston kits, and the CSL rear calipers are unique because they have a larger piston. We've got the rear bolts there that hold the caliper carrier to the hubs, and some BMW brake paste, along with the 4 bolts to hold the grub screws to hold the discs to the hubs. And then we've got the front flexible hoses, along with the front brake piston reseal kits, and the 4 bolts for the front brake caliper carriers, and then again the grub screws for the front discs to the hubs. And we've got 6 little bolts there that hold the front brake disc backing plates to the kingpins. And we've got a front brake pad sensor because the rear one's okay. And we've got new dust covers for the brake nipples, and a new bleed nipples themselves as well. And a new cover for the carbon canister at the rear of the car has turned up from a special order from Germany. This thing on its own was about £120, I think. But it does come with the speed clip, so that's always a bonus. Another delivery of parts for the CSL this morning. Nothing major on this one, so we got some genuine belts. The main poly V belt there, which powers the alternator, power steering pump and water pump, and then the little air conditioning one there because we noticed they've got hairline cracks in them. We've also got some the correct fixings for the front panel plastics, some front panel wiring clips there. There's a gearbox Torx bolt here that we noticed was missing, and also these 2 Torx bolts are the ones that hold the oil cooler housing assembly to the bottom of the radiator. Some new diff bung washers, and that's it for this order. And the other aluminium brackets arrived for the CSL. This is for the passenger side. These are the little brackets that bolt into the chassis legs up on the top up there and drop down and hold the front bumper or wheel arch corner under trays in place. And on a CSL it's unique and different because it's got this cutout here which allows the secondary air feed for the CSL airbox to pass through it. It may well be exactly the same as an M3, it might just be that they machine this piece out, not entirely sure. But to give you an example of the CSL tax, shall we say, on this, the standard M3 ones are around about £25, and this one is £129, just because of this extra piece or missing piece because of a CSL version. So last time we checked with the CSL, we were just installing the engine. That's now in and resting on some wood until we get the gearbox back in. So the engine underneath is still original, not been painted. That'll either be for a later project or just to show its original sort of condition. And up here you can see the CSL chassis legs with the black overspray just coming down and showing the original sort of E-coat paint underneath. And then everything else should be either cleaned up or replaced. So we've got new fixings on the subframe, the powder coated front subframe, new heat shields and fixings where possible, and the earth strap's been cleaned up just in the middle of power steering installation. And we've gone for a new Xenon drop link potentiometer on the front because the corrosion sets in normally on those bolts and expands and breaks the plastic, so we've got new hardware for that. The arms are in good condition, so they've been cleaned up and installed. This is the front, looks brand new one, but this is powder coated in a satin finish to try and replicate the BMW panel coatings that the new parts come with. And then we even got the part number off the old orange sticker and ordered it, which is this one here, ended in 644. Nowadays it's an updated sticker, which is a shame. It's now white and it comes through with a new barcode, but that's the correct part number for this car. So we've got new genuine BMW engine mounts and nuts, top and bottom, cleaned heat shields. Another heat shield was renewed up on this, behind that steering shaft. This one here was renewed, that one with the letter M on it. as was the bulkhead sound material before the engine went in. A little bit dark up there, but that was replaced. And a new heat shield fixings underneath the car. There's the bottoms of the wheel arch liners, the new plastic. The aim is that we're trying to replace every piece of plastic as well as all the other components on the vehicle. We're in the right engine bay now, right wheel arch area. You can pick up the black sort of dustings of sapphire black that we applied to get that factory finish. I'm still going to do these arms here, these aluminium brackets, they're up next. Don't worry, we won't be leaving anything rusty on there or corroded. I'll clean the brackets as well, and new bolts for the front control arm brushes. And the engine on the back has had a rear main crankshaft oil seal. Original flywheel and clutch, because there's history of that being replaced, I believe the owner said. New release bearing though, because there was too much grease on the old one and it looked like it had been snagging and also digging into the fork slightly, but we've obviously renewed the flywheel bolts for genuine BMW ones with the Loctite, and also a dowel, and also clutch bolts with the BMW Loctite ones. Used the BMW tool as well. So we're just at the stage of gearbox installation now. We've got the box here. So normally they'd be separated, the clutch actuator system would stay on the car, but if you've ever taken one of these out, you know those knuckle joints there, the pins corrode and don't come out. So we've taken this one out complete and then serviced it, taken it apart, and put a new joint in there with 2 new pins and circlips and lots of nickel anti-seize paste, so it won't corrode again in the future. And we've also done 2 detent springs, which are common for braking on the SMG gearboxes, one behind here and one behind here. Also the box has been cleaned of oil. It's still got its obviously original aluminium corrosion on it, but it's been cleaned up internally in the bell housing as well. We've got a brand new BMW fork here, and a ball pin behind, and a spring clip over here, a new guide bush, or guide sleeve should we say, up here with the 4 bolts, and a brand new BMW release bearing as well, and that's going in next. So another update on the CSL rebuild. We've still got protective covers on. We haven't taken the done the full demask yet, but we're looking at a brand new rear exhaust heat shield. It just looks fantastic, fresh and clean with new fixings up against the painted floor. And then we've still got to put the 1 floor grommet in there, and we're just waiting for the new plastic that holds or covers the carbon fuel canister. That's coming from Germany. So now I've got a bit of light on the subject so we can see how good this is. All new fixings replaced where possible. New spring pads that up there. Obviously all new bushes. New subframe bushes there. You see the outline of our reinforcement plates as well. New brake lines in the distance. And ball joints. Obviously everything's powder coated or cleaned to a high level, like the original CSL camber arms here. They've been cleaned. This protection here is just because there's no shock absorber holding this corner. We have to have protection on both sides just so that it doesn't mark itself against the subframe. That comes out once the shock absorber is fitted. New shock bolts here. Brake disc backing plate. Hubs are original, but new wheel bearings are inside. I've got new handbrake mechanism, so brand new shoes and spring kit. Pivot arm there, and the adjusting wheel up here. And handbrake cables are all new as well, genuine BMW items. We've got the brake brackets here on the trailing arm, which are going to hold the flexi hoses for the brake caliper once they're fitted, and then all new clips around the trailing arm section, which go off to the the ABS rear wiring, and on the other side there's ABS and pad sensor. And then that's a nice shot there, the satin finish on the trailing arms with the new BMW bushes in there and new bolts, and you just see the highlights or the dusting of the black overspray into these wheel arches, which is the OEM replica finish. What else have we done since last update? We've done the anti-roll bars, so we've got the brackets fitted up in the front arm, top arms, brand new BMW drop links, and then the satin finish CSL anti-roll bar, which is going to be put up into the new bushes, new brackets and new bolts, which are there ready to be fitted once the springs and the shock absorbers are in place. I think most of the fuel system was fitted last time we updated. It's got a filler neck and all its various BMW clips, and a new filler tube there with the BMW supplied clips. Now the prop shaft's installed. So since then the gearbox is in, so you do the rear main oil seal, original flywheel and clutch, and a new release bearing and ball pin and spring clip inside. The engine sump and the engine component itself and the gearbox are the only things that haven't been painted or powder coated. They've been dusted off, but that's not within this job spec. So gearbox is in on new BMW rubber mounts at the back with the original vibration absorber, powder coated rear cross member with the new bolts and fixings, new nuts and washers for the bottom and the same for the top, new fixings for the prop shaft coupling where it meets onto the gearbox flange. And new fixings at the back of the prop. We don't paint the prop, it sounds silly, but they are weighted and balanced, so we don't paint or powder coat the props. CV joint was all fine, so that's been reused with a brand new paper gasket for the joint to hold the CV grease in. We've just got new bolts and washers at the back there. You just see our reinforcement plates, spreader plates poking out there. And again there. All those seamed edges nice and covered with seam sealer, and the drains still present and not filled up. New heat shield from BMW there. Stops the exhaust heat going into the left front subframe bush. So the gearbox in, we're able to get the lambda probe wire in situ with the original brackets cleaned of wax. Powder coated bracket there with new fixing and speed clip, part of the under tray holding system. And I don't think the steering rack was installed last time, so we've got the steering rack in now with new bolts and new top nuts, and then the high pressure pipe was fine and not leaking, so we've painted the fixing, the metal pipes and the crimp joins with POR 15 rust preventative paint. I think that's about it. So we're on to the heat shields next in the centre, and also the front end needs to be built up next. And the other thing I've got is the power steering banjo bolts and the new seal washers there on the painted pipes where they connect to the steering rack. One's got a pressure valve in it, so we replaced that as well, and also painted these pipes, the double pipe set, which connects the top of the rack to the side of the rack. Another update on this CSL rebuild. We've got a few more plastics and under trays on there now. So we've got new BMW plastics. This is the left rear, They may look dirty or scratched, but that is the new BMW ones as they arrive from the factory. It's quite a rough finished plastic and the edges are quite poor, but it is all brand new components. And the aquaplane guards over there on the left. There's the right one that holds part of the centre under tray and also hides the fuel tank on the right hand side. So we still need to edge up around the side skirt area and where the new painted floor finish is, which is hidden behind the behind the side skirt line, and install new jacking points and things. That will be done next. So you may see overlaps of paint, but obviously that's going to be disguised and hidden behind the side skirt. New heat shield is on the centre prop shaft area, which looks great. Nice and fresh, good contrasting colours. And they don't come with these clips for the lambda probe holders, but we've put new clips in there, so the wiring for the rear lambda probe sensors is going to be okay. Got new fixings in there. I don't think we had the roll bar fitted in the last one, so it's just loosely fitted at the moment because we've still got to put the drive shafts in, as you can see. Just waiting on for some drive shaft CV joint stainless steel boot clips, and then we'll just remove or drop that roll bar down and protect it so that it doesn't touch the diff cover, and get both drive shafts fitted up. Rear shocks, I can't remember if those were on in the last video. So we've got new CSL rear shocks and bolts and sleeves and additional dampers and top mounts. Everything's new. That's the trailing arm. I'm trying to think what else is on the update. Front end then, I suppose, really. We've been working on the front end. Let's get out of that glare. That's a bit better. So we've got the CSL front struts and springs, so they've been powder coated. So we've got the rear springs in there as well, actually, which weren't on the last video. So there's the powder coated springs in a satin black to match the rest of the satin components, like the front cross member here. So it should all be matching and as close to BMW replica paint as possible. So that's the front struts, front springs. We've got new dust covers for the pistons, new bump stops inside there, new BMW drop links, anti-roll bar drop links. And then the kingpins here, which again has been powder coated, where the hub's going to sit next on the wheel bearing, and the CSL anti-roll bar, which is again unique to the CSLs. They're hollowed roll bars, and they're a slight bit bigger than the factory M3 ones. New steering tie rods are partially going through, so we're separating the two pieces. These are new items, and making sure they've got nickel anti-seize paste on the female and male threads, so they'll always undo. These brackets are on order from BMW, so they'll be new, so they won't have oxidization on them. Slightly bent, they always get a little bit bent out of shape over the years. This one, interestingly, is standard M3, so that's about £25. This one's unique to a CSL because it's got the extra cutout for the CSL air intake, and that's about £120. It's scary money, but you're going to have them new so they look good and in keeping with the rest of the condition of the car. Got a bit glare on this angle, but the right's fitted up. So next we're going to be fitting the BMW new wishbones and the front hubs and wheel bearings.
So I mean, like I said, it was very.
So left front steering tie rod, all fitted, greased inside the female and male joints, so they've been separated so the loads come undone in the future. New BMW boot clips fitted, and the genuine BMW front arm there.
It's just basically trying to just let people know that sometimes, you know, it's like
Kingpin and ABS sensor are installed, so brake disc backing plate next. And you see we also grease inside the threads, so when things are being fitted they're always going to be well lubricated and come undone in future years.
And you can hear more of that.
Test fitting of this very special carbon ceramic WP Pro EX8 kit. Absolutely massive discs. I forget what width they are actually, I'll have to look on the spec sheet, but they're a good 32 or something, maybe even a little bit more. Just trying the caliper next. This is the CSL rear brake caliper rebuild for the CSL restoration that we're doing. So we've had the original CSL calipers media blasted and masked inside the piston housings, so there's no chance of any grit or paint getting into there. Then they've been powder primed and then powder colour application, and then also wet lacquered, and it's all satin finished to try and replicate the original BMW finishes. So we've got the caliper carriers over there, the the calipers over on the right, and the BMW piston reseal kits. And you can't actually buy these pistons from BMW, but we've managed to locate a set of new pistons. The other ones had corrosion on them, so we've got a new set here, so we can get those rebuilt, and that will finish off the rear braking system for the CSL. Here's the genuine CSL cats, straight from BMW, and these are being replaced because the old ones just don't match the rest of the new exhaust system we've got from BMW. Lots of heavy tarnishing which just won't polish out. We know that as we've tried it on other vehicles. Cats obviously get hotter being closer to the front of the engine than the rest of the section downstream, so these get more tarnished and are harder to bring back to a good state with polishing, so customer opted for a brand new one. Obviously we know this is genuine new BMW part with the labels and stickers. We've got handwritten CSL, which doesn't mean much, but these green stamps are the ones that CSL people will know means a genuine part, and then obviously we've got confirmation there with the part number as well. So this is the genuine CSL centre section. It's slightly lighter, possibly has a different silencer makeup inside. So all brand new, straight from BMW, nice and clean. And again, we know it's the CSL version because of the green stampings. That's the last piece of the CSL exhaust puzzle, rear silencer. Nice protection caps on it from the factory. Again, confirmed CSL with the side brackets that are drilled, the part number, and the green factory stamp that says CSL. And there it is, all three pieces, just shy of 3 grams worth of CSL genuine exhaust in 2016. So that's a complete, apart from the headers, that's a complete exhaust new system for the CSL restoration. This customer has opted to try a Remus sports exhaust with the rest of the CSL parts, so we're going to keep the factory CSL silencer in his stock ready for if he ever puts the car back to factory or was to sell the car, and we're going to go with this Remus brand new silencer for the restoration build. This is the last time we're going to see this amazing new heat shield. We're just about to put the rear silencer on, so thought we'd video this area one last time. New plastics on the carbon canister cover, just behind the rear axle. Something about new heat shields, but they just look great. So yeah, we're nearly finished now. We've got the centre heat shield on as well. A couple more exhaust pieces, which are all just here. Customers opted for a Remus rear silencer, brand new CSL centre section, and brand new CSL cats, and an entire exhaust fitting kit as well from BMW.
Break. Ready?
We've got a new genuine CSL air filter for the final part of the CSL restoration. The old one had to go back to a BMW dealership for inspection after we found it heavily dirtied, soiled, after it was recently had an inspection 2 service, but that's a story for another day. one of the final things we're doing on the CSL rebuild is a genuine BMW dealer MOT, KDS wheel alignment and air conditioning service. So we're just prepping up now just before we head over to the BMW dealer. Got our protection covers on because I think they're also going to carry out the airbag recall as well, which is outstanding. We've got our little notes as well, just kindly asking them not to wash the car, and any road test needs prior consent from the owner. So going over there now, going to put some miles on it as part of the road test plan as well. So we're well on our way now to BMW in Bath for the MOT, wheel alignment, KDS and the aircon service. We've done over 10 miles now, all is well. So we just arrived at Walesway, so we're going to get the BMW MOT, KDS wheel alignment and aircon service. So it's all completed now, the underside restoration on this M3 CSL. Had a 50 or so mile road test, and everything is absolutely fine, as you'd expect, almost like a brand new vehicle. The looks of it, the smell of it, the condition of it. Ready to go back to the customer for them to enjoy now.